Thank you, Stephanie. And I want to remind everyone to please close your video and mute yourself. And we're going to get going. Before we get started, I also want to go over some housekeeping, just a reminder of a few things. First of all, it's our mission. Who are the Master Gardeners of Napa County? We are volunteers trained and certified through the UC Davis, University of California, Davis. And our mission is to educate the public on home horticulture. Also, the next slide, please. A little bit about becoming a master gardener. We're just about ready to start our opening for training to become a master gardener. So here on this slide, you'll see some information about finding out more about when we'll be starting the class. It will be for 2025. So you can take a picture of this slide or use your camera and get the QR code. It'll take you to our website and you can learn more about becoming a master gardener. And then the next slide is about our survey, which we send out. That's a survey that comes from the state. And what they're trying to determine is, are we making a difference in how you garden? Because that is our role as master gardeners, public education. So we'd really appreciate it if you would take the survey. But if you do not want to receive the survey, please put your name in the chat now, and we will remove your name from the survey. We do hope, though, that you'll take a little time and respond to it. Okay, one other housekeeping item, and that is questions. If questions come up, please put them in the chat and we will answer them at the end. But we'd also like you to stay along and maybe even make comments to how any successes or failures you've had in growing tomatoes in Napa County. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mike LaCour.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Mike LaCours. I am a master gardener from the class of 2023. I'm a longtime gardener from a family of gardeners. My mother, my grandmother, my grandfather were all gardeners, and my uncle was early in the heirloom tomato movement. I'm originally from St. Louis, but I moved here to Napa in 2018. So we're going to talk about growing tomatoes in smaller spaces today. And you might ask, why would I want to grow any kind of vegetables in small spaces? Well, you really don't need a large space to enjoy vegetable gardens. In fact, you can use containers or a very efficient way of growing vegetables in small spaces. Lots of vegetables can be grown in tomatoes, or excuse me, tomatoes in containers. Personally, I have grown tomatoes, as we talked about, but I've also grown potatoes, mint, rosemary, blueberry, and parsley in containers. Today, we're going to talk specifically about tomatoes. Now, why are tomatoes particularly well suited to this? Well, growers have developed tomato varieties that are especially for containers, so they do really well in that sort of environment. Tomatoes in general require pretty simple care. As long as you're consistent, you'll usually do pretty well. And of course, nothing beats a homegrown tomato. I know just the difference between a grocery store tomato and one you've grown yourself is night and day. And if you do have a larger garden and you've got multiple beds, containers actually provide a really easy way to do crop rotation. You can keep growing the things you want to grow, even though you're in a year where you can't be putting it in your beds. All right. So I thought I'd show you a picture of my garden. It is, as you can see, it's not particularly large. It's about 10 by 12, and it's in about the only full sun spot I have in my garden. So I use containers to help me get the most out of it. You can see all the containers that are around the outside and the inside. And I don't know if you can see my my pointer, but right here in the middle is the tomatoes that I grew as part of our field trial last year in these 3 containers right here. So other than my experience, how do we know that tomatoes do well in containers and in small spaces in particular? Well, every year, actually twice a year, the master gardeners here in Napa do field trials where we test a variety of popular vegetables that we grow from seed. We do it in our own gardens, and we have some members of the public that join us. We assess which varieties grow well and which growing practices are the most successful. And then we share the results with the public through presentations like this. We do newspaper articles, and we have other outlets like our website. In our most recent field trial for tomatoes, we did 3 different varieties, 3 semi-determinate container varieties. We did one called the Prairie Fire, the Super Bush, and the Inca Jewel. And we had 14 of our master gardeners participated and 9 members of the public. And then we gathered data on container size, sun exposure, watering, soils and amendment, and fertilization. So I use a term there you may not be familiar with, semi-determinate. Tomato plants can be described as either determinate or indeterminate. Determinate varieties grow as a bush type plant. They will typically bear their fruit over a period of about 4 to 6 weeks. Whereas indeterminates grow as a vine. They just continue to grow all season. They get bigger and bigger and bigger. They bear fruit and basically until the frost comes and kills the plant. So semi-determinates are sort of in between. They're a little taller than the determinate varieties, and so they will need a little bit of support, but they do grow as a bush. You see the picture over here on your right. These are semi-determinate varieties, and the only support they really need is just a tomato cage like this, and it does quite well. So the tomatoes that we used were the Inca Jewel, which is a Roma or type tomato, which is a sauce tomato or a paste tomato, as some people call them. We use Prairie Fire, which is a type of cherry tomato. It's an elongated tomato. It's a little bit bigger than most cherry tomatoes, a little longer than your thumb. And the Super Bush, which is a classic globe tomato, a slicing tomato. So we found in our field trial that there were 4 keys to success. That these things really seem to make the difference. They were container size, regular watering, regular fertilizing, and full sun. We found some things that didn't seem to make a lot of difference to success. One was the tomato variety, and by that I mean that all 3 varieties did well. None of the varieties did particularly better than the others. I grew all 3 varieties. I had success with all 3 varieties, and so did quite a few of the other folks that were participating. The soil brand didn't matter. All of the Master Gardener participants, we all used fresh potting soil in our containers. We used different brands that we bought from different places around town. It didn't seem to make a difference what brand we used in terms of our success. Some folks added amendments to the soil, some didn't. For instance, I didn't add amendments. I just used, well, I added a little compost on the top, but nothing, nothing any fancy amendments. That didn't seem to make a difference which amendments that's used. Also, as I said, the fertilizing mattered, doing your regular fertilizing, but the brand didn't. Folks reported the brand that they use. We used different ones. I happen to use a liquid fertilizer. Other people use solids. It didn't seem to make a difference which brand you used. And then finally, the container type. And by container type, I mean whether you used a plastic container with a single wall or a double wall, or whether you use a ceramic container. It didn't really seem to make much difference, with the exception of some people had poor results with the single walled black plastics because the soil got really hot. And I'm going to talk about that in a bit, because there is a way, if that's what you happen to have, there's some good ways to get around that problem. So summarizing our findings from our field trials, you absolutely can grow tomatoes successfully in small spaces, in containers here in Napa County. I show you a picture of one of our master gardeners. She had some pots right here on her deck and did, as you can see, these plants are quite big. All right. We got some really good comments from our public participants. I'd love to see what members of the public had to say when they participate. One person said how they really love growing in containers, that it was really easy, and that the Prairie Fire was the sweetest tomato they'd ever eaten. Another one really liked the Prairie Fire and thought it was one of the easiest tomatoes they had grown. One person just said worked well, and I thought that was a great, succinct comment. And another person talked about how they like to try new tomato varieties. That's one of the nice things about containers. You can try different varieties in your container. So if you've got 3 containers, you can try 3 varieties and see which varieties that you like to grow the best. I also agreed with the 2 comments on the Prairie Fire. Personally, I really like that tomato. That during the field trial was the first time that I'd grown that tomato, and I'm definitely going to grow it again because it was, I mean, you could cut it up as a salad for a salad tomato. You could eat them off the vine, or what we did with them several nights was we just took them and sauteed them with garlic and olive oil and just made a quick weeknight pasta sauce. Of course, not everybody had success. There were some people that had some issues, and they reported some of the problems they had. One person talked about that their containers were probably too crowded on their deck and didn't get enough direct sunlight. And they also said they didn't get enough water, which, well, that's obviously going to have an effect on your plants. One person said their plants suffered from something, but they didn't get it diagnosed. And fortunately, we didn't get any pictures, so we don't know what went wrong with it. But we will talk about some of the things that can go wrong, and particularly pests and diseases that tomatoes will get tonight. And this goes back to the comment I made earlier. One person said it was too hot. They thought that the single wall plastic pots got too hot because the same tomatoes growing in the ground did way better. All right, so let's dig into those keys to success a little bit more in detail. We did find that a minimum of 5 gallons is the smallest size you want to use. Bigger is better. A larger container allows you to prevent root binding, which is the main reason why you want a larger container, because if the roots get bound up in there, then that means that they push the soil out of the way. They're not going to get adequate nutrients, and they're going to have problems with water retention. It also helps you moderate the soil temperature. A larger container is not going to get as hot. Going again back to that black plastic problem. I know I personally had experience with that a couple of years ago. I grew some vegetables in some black pots, and they really seemed to be suffering from heat. I took a thermometer from my kitchen and just measured the soil temperature, and I found that the soil was way too hot. It was nearly 100 degrees. According to the USDA, the average soil temperature in July in Napa County is 67 degrees. So 100 is definitely way too hot for the plants to thrive. And in this picture, you see a couple of things that folks did to try to mitigate that. In the lower left, this master gardener took some of that white packing foam and wrapped it around it to help reflect the sun back. And in the upper picture there, those are mine. I found an old can of white spray paint in my garage, and I just spray painted the black ones white, and that made a huge difference. I didn't have any heat problems with them during the field trials. So another one of our keys to success is regular watering. Now, some of our master gardeners were really good about hand watering, being very consistent, getting the right amount in there, getting it right on the schedules. I am absolutely not one of those people. I have a bad habit of forgetting and then going and overwatering, trying to make up for it, which is just awful for the plants. Tomatoes really like their water to be consistent. So I use an automatic drip system, and I think it's a really great way to go. You can pick up a timer. There's that picture on the left is the timer. They're really simple to operate. They cost about $30. They're not particularly expensive at all. The drip heads you need are what you see there over on the right. That's a 1 gallon per hour drip head. That I watered during the summer, during the warmer times. I watered twice a week for 45 minutes with a 1 gallon drip head. That gives 1.5 gallons per week. So tomatoes don't require a lot of water. That's not very much water at all for plants during our hot summers, but they really like it to be consistent. And so the automatic system helps you avoid over and under watering. It's not set it or forget it. You do have to monitor them, but it does really help you keep your watering regular. And then another piece of success was regular fertilizing. The brand didn't matter, as we said before. If you have a favorite fertilizer brand, keep on using it. The main thing is just to follow the manufacturer's recommended schedule, because different fertilizer manufacturers have formulated their fertilizers to work for different schedules. I used a liquid fertilizer that the manufacturer said to apply every 2 weeks. That worked really well for me. But whatever you do, just check the manufacturer's schedule. If it's not on the container, you can usually go to the website and find out what the schedule is for tomatoes. All right, and our last key to success was full sun. Tomatoes need 6 to 8 hours of direct sun a day to grow. More sun is usually better. They like the sun. But you may need to add some shade on some of the hottest days when it starts heading up toward 100. You might find that you need to shade the tomatoes a bit. We'll talk about that in a little bit when we talk about some of the issues that tomatoes can face. Okay. We'll also talk about some of the common problems and pests that you face with tomatoes. We'll talk about abiotic disorders, those not from living things chewing on your tomatoes. We'll talk about pests and diseases. And I also warn you to watch out for tomato thieves. That you can see the tomato thieves that I've had to deal with here on the right-hand side. Don't let those innocent faces fool you. Those two are the reason I have a fence around my garden. So abiotic disorders. Abiotic disorders are any disorder on a plant that's not caused by a disease or a pest. And here on the West Coast, the most common ones are sunburn, leaf roll, blossom end rot, fruit crack, and yellow-green shoulders. On the upper left here, this is sunburn. A sunburn is caused by too much sun directly on the fruit, and that usually occurs when someone is over pruned. You'll see a lot of pruning is, pruning is a controversial subject. Some people believe in pruning, some people don't. You'll see a lot of advice on how to prune your tomatoes to get the most growth out of them. But if you do decide to prune, you need to be very careful not to prune back so much that the fruit is in direct sunlight. The fruit does need some shade during the day, or you get sunburn like this. And the upper right over here is leaf roll. Leaf roll is caused by heat stress. The plant is simply too hot, and what it's trying to do is protect itself by rolling up its leaves in order to give itself some shade, reduce some of the water loss that it's facing. You can tell for sure that the problem is leaf roll as opposed to something else, is if the leaves start unrolling again once the sun starts setting and the temperature starts going down. The protection against leaf roll is if you start seeing this on the really hot days, a couple of things you can do. You can, if you're using tomato cages, you can just put an old sheet over them during the hottest part of the day. If your containers are light enough, or they're just perhaps they're on your patio, you just drag them back into the shade until it cools off later in the day. Or put a big piece of cardboard or something, whatever. Just give them a little shade during those days where it start heading up toward the hundreds. Once the temperature reverts back to our normal temperatures in the mid 80s, they'll be just fine. And the lower left-hand corner is the dreaded blossom end rot, which every tomato grower has faced at one time or another. This is caused by a lack of calcium. And the lack of calcium is caused by too much water. What happens is when the soil gets saturated, the plant can't draw calcium up from out of the soil that it needs to develop the fruit. And so the blossom end, that is the end that's the farthest away from the stem, starts rotting away. The solution to this is to water less, water regular, water less. The fruit that gets the blossom end rot, you're just going to have to throw that away, but any new fruit that comes on later is going to be just fine. And in the lower middle here is fruit crack. That is caused also by overwatering, especially when the plant is growing really rapidly. What happens there is the plant takes up so much water and puts so much water into the fruit that the skin actually cracks. It doesn't affect the quality of the tomato, particularly if you're going to use them for sauce or something where you're going to take the skins off, but it doesn't make a pretty tomato. And the solution there, of course, is reducing your watering and staying on that schedule. And then finally, in the lower right-hand corner, you see what's called yellow-green shoulders. This is another sun-related issue, usually caused by too much pruning. Again, if you are going to prune, make sure that the fruit has some shade. And in fact, if you see this on some of yours, even if you haven't pruned, you might want to just tuck the fruit back behind some leaves so it doesn't have too much sun. And then so one thing to keep in mind is that several of these are heat-related issues. And heat-related issues can be worse in containers. So you need to, if you are going to grow in containers, you need to be monitoring for these. All right. So there are lots of pests that want to eat your tomatoes or eat your tomato plants. These four are the most common. The first one on the top is called a cutworm. And this is probably the worst of all of these pets because it likes to go after your the seedlings, excuse me, and it will actually cut the seedlings right down to the ground, thus its name. A way you can protect against cutworms is while you still have small seedlings, you can take like an old toilet paper tube and just make a little cardboard collar around the bottom, and that will keep the cutworms out. The stink bugs and the hornworms, the stink bugs, they like to go after the fruit, and they'll just make all these holes in your fruit as they eat it. And the hornworms will eat the leaves. And in fact, on a small plant, they'll strip all the leaves right off. Both of these can usually be controlled by hand picking them off. If you go out in the early evening, when the weather's starting to cool off, that's when the insects are the most active. And that's when you can pick them off. There are biologics that you can use, like BT spray that works for the hornworms. There are some other sprays that work for the stink bugs, but pretty much around here, we don't get the really severe infections of them. And so I think you could probably just, if you just monitor them in the evening, just take a look at them every day, I think you'll be able to pick off any that come along. And the bottom are aphids. Aphids attack just about every kind of vegetable that you will grow here. They can be a real pain. Now, good news about aphids is they usually won't kill kill an adult plant, and you can get rid of them just by spraying them off with a good hard spray of water. That will knock the aphids off of the plant, and they aren't capable of getting back on again. They're just going to hit the soil and die. They can be a bit devastating to a young plant. So if you do have a really bad aphid infection, you can use, and hosing them off isn't doing the job, you can use some horticultural soaps. Just be careful with the horticultural soaps on really young plants because they can burn seedlings. Okay, so there are also other types of pests that want to chew on your plants and chew on your fruit. Slugs and snails, which are everywhere around here. I'm sure I see them. I take the dogs out for a walk every morning, and there's slugs and snails all over the place. Also, the snails tend to like the fruit, whereas the slugs will eat any part of the plant. You can handpick slugs and snails if there are not too many of them. You can also set traps for them. Beer traps actually work, but you do have to keep up on them and make sure you keep refilling them with beer. There are slug bait that you can use, which you can get from your local nursery. There are also vertebrate pests that can go after your after your tomatoes. Birds and squirrels in particular want to eat the fruit. Those are actually pretty easy to control. If you're having problems with squirrels or birds going after your fruit, a little bird netting, you just put that over the plants. That tends to keep both of them away. Gophers will go after plants that are in the ground. They like to eat the roots of the plant, and it unfortunately kills the plant. Good news is if you're growing in containers, gophers usually won't bother them. They usually won't bother to come up out of the ground and crawl up onto the container. Rats, on the other hand, they will go after the fruit, and they will go after the ones in the containers. If you are having problems with rats, there are, of course, rat traps you can buy, or you might want to consider calling a professional exterminator. Okay, diseases. There are lots and lots and lots of diseases for tomatoes, but there are three in particular that are common around here. The first one is called Fusarium wilt, and it is up here in the middle. It's characterized by yellow blotches and holes in the leaves. The second one is called Verticillium wilt. It is also characterized by yellow blotches and dying at the ends of the leaves. Both of these are fungal infections, and unfortunately, both of these are fatal to the plant. If the plant gets these, it's going to die, and the best thing to do is to take the plant out before it spreads to anything else. Your best defense against these is to buy varieties that are resistant. Growers have done a pretty good job of coming up with varieties that are resistant to both of these. Look for the F or FF on the tomatoes label, or the V on the tomato, to see if it is resistant to these diseases. Another disease that's common is powdery mildew. Powdery mildew can at first blush be mistaken for these others because it can also have the yellow on the leaves and some dying areas. But the difference is that you'll notice with the powdery mildew is that there will be kind of a powdery, almost looks like talcum powder around on the leaves. The good news about powdery mildew is it's usually not too much of a problem on an adult plant. You can just pick off the leaves that are affected, and it'll be fine. It can, on a younger plant, kind of overwhelm the plant. If it's really becoming a problem, there are fungicides you can get. Copper fungicide is an organic fungicide, and it is particularly effective against powdery mildew. And you can pick that up at the hardware store or local garden center. All right, so I have really just barely touched the surface on the kinds of problems that you can see with with tomatoes, or in fact with vegetables of any kind. So I wanted to make you guys familiar with a couple of really great resources that are out there. If you're growing tomatoes or any vegetables, that will help you identify what the problem is and find a solution. The first one is the University of California's Agricultural and Natural Resources Integrated Pest Management Site, or as we call it, the IPM. The IPM is this great place where you can go and find out about the pests that are out there for whatever it is you're trying to grow, and find great information on it. In fact, I'm gonna take you there to the site now and let you see what's there. As you can see there, you can find information on garden pest. If you have a small farm, there's great information on agricultural pest. If you have some natural environment, there's some great information on that. And there's even a whole section on what's new and coming, new invasive things that are starting to come in. If you go into the home and garden, which is what we're talking about today, you can see that there's information about pest in flowers, in fruit trees, lawns and turf, vegetables and shrubs, and vegetables, melons, and herbs. You go into these areas and you can find information on whatever particular thing you're trying to grow. If you want some more stuff on tomatoes, you can come in on tomatoes, and there's a great website here now on growing tomatoes and all the different kinds of diseases and critters that are trying to try to eat your tomatoes and take advantage of what you've done. All right. So I have put here in the presentation, and this presentation will be available on our website shortly after this talk, a link to the IPM. But if you forget, you just Google UC IPM and you'll find it. It's the first thing that'll come right up. Another tool that I want to show you is called the Plant Problem Diagnostic Tool, and it's also from UCANR. And the Plant Problem Diagnostic Tool is a great tool for when you're trying to figure out what's wrong with your plant and you just don't know where to go. So I'm going to open that up and give you a quick demonstration of how it works. When you get into it, you'll see a bit of how to work it, but I'm going to demonstrate it for you, and it's really quite easy. The first thing it asks you is what kind of a plant you're working with, and we're talking about tomatoes today, so let's go and click on those. And it'll ask, or click on vegetables and melons. Then it'll ask you which particular plant it is, and we're going to pick tomatoes, of course. And then it'll ask you what part of the plant is having the problem. And let's for the demonstration, let's pick fruit. And it'll ask you what the damage is. And let's say for our demonstration that we see these holes in it, that somebody's chewing on our fruit, and we want to figure out who it is and get rid of them. So we're going to pick this one, gouges, holes, bites, and frass. If you're not familiar with the term frass, that just basically means insect poop. If I pick that, now I look over here at view results. It says there are 8 things that it could possibly be. So if I click on view results, on the left-hand side, it gives me a great list of what those things are from some of the things we've talked about, like the hornworms and the cutworms. And it also has slugs and snails. So let's say we've been seeing a lot of snails around our garden and we want to know maybe that's been what's been chewing on it. So we're going to pick snails, and we'll come into the page on snails where you'll be able to see some pictures of what snail damage looks like. You'll be able to see what snail eggs are to see if that's what really is in your garden. There's some information on snails themselves about how long they live and where they're usually fine. There's some information on what kind of damage they cause. As I said, they create irregular holes. And there's a really great little short video, in fact, on how to identify snail damage. There's information on cultural control. Cultural control is the things you do in your garden to try to prevent snails from wanting to live there. Things like keeping debris cleaned up, maybe having some edges around your garden, and things like that. Gives you some information on which particular plants are susceptible. And if you do decide to use the snail bait or slug bait, there's a quick little video on how to do that. It also gives you some information on hand picking that I talked about before, and on how to make traps. So it's got a ton of information on how to identify who's chewing on your plant, and once you identify it, how to deal with them. And in fact, if you've decided that's what it is, you can go ahead and click this quick tip, and it'll give you something you can print out and take with you when you head to the store to buy whatever it is you want to buy. I gave you in the presentation, I gave you the link here, but you can also get to it from the IPM. And if you're in the IPM, in this home and garden area, you scroll down, you'll see plant problem diagnostic tool. So there's another way to get to it. All right. Oops, wrong slide. One more resource is available is our Master Gardeners here. We provide a help desk that we man on Mondays and Fridays from 10 to 1. And now that summer's starting, we're going to start doing it on Wednesdays as well at the same time. You can email us with your plant problem. Gives your address and phone number. And if you send a photo, that will really help us diagnose what the problem is. You also can call and leave a message, and we will get back to you during our time. And if you have plant samples you'd like somebody to look at, you can drop them by while we're there. We're at 1710 Soskull Avenue, which is right next to the Central Valley Hardware. We're in the Napa County Ag Extension offices. So you just go in there to the extension office and ask for the Master Gardener on duty, and they'll track us down and we'll come out. So to summarize, with the right care, tomatoes absolutely can be grown very successfully in containers, as I have 3 pictures from our field trials here this past year. Now, if you decide that this is something you want to try, then I'm going to make a pitch, because next Saturday, we are having our annual tomato sale. It's going to be in that same location at 1710 Soskull Avenue, right next to Central Valley Hardware. It's going to be in the parking lot, not indoors. But we are going to have 25 varieties of tomatoes, including the Inca Jewel and the Prairie Fire. We will also have booths that will provide answers to any of your questions about growing tomatoes, on improving your soil. We're going to have a booth on melons, and we'll be there to answer any of your gardening questions. So even if you don't want to buy tomatoes, come on by and talk to some of our Master Gardeners. To find out more about this, you can go to our website, which is napamg.canr.edu. And on our website, we have a list of all our tomatoes. In fact, I'll show it to you. If you go into our website and you go to click here on the tomato sale, we have a list of all the tomatoes that we'll have for sale, along with information about how large the fruit is, whether it's to determine our indeterminate, a hybrid variety, or an heirloom. Whether it's an early variety or a mid-season variety, whether or not it's suitable for containers, and whether or not it's disease resistant. One thing I'll say about these suitable for containers, plenty of our master gardeners have said, yeah, I'm going to do it anyway, and had good success with growing items that are not particularly, aren't, the growers said, no, that's not really a container tomato. From my experience in a small space, I would stick with a determinate variety just because they don't get so big. But if you've got the space, feel free to try any tomato you want in a container. And then once you've decided what you want, we even added a little shopping list, or you can print this out and mark how many you want to buy so you're ready to go when you get to the sale. I absolutely recommend that you come early. We do tend to sell out, especially the most popular varieties. I can guarantee that the prairie fires will disappear if you're not one of the early people to get there. There is always a really long line at 9 o'clock of people waiting to get in. So if you're interested in getting tomatoes, you want to get the ones you want, you need to be there on time. Tomatoes are $5 a piece, and it is cash and check only. I want to just take a second to acknowledge some of the references that I use. Most of them were from our University of California A&R, and one I got from the USDA on getting those soil temperatures. I also want to show you another resource that's available, and it's this publication 8159. I put a link here for it, but you can just Google UCA&R 8159, and it is a brochure, or actually a small booklet on growing tomatoes in a home garden, and it has information on how to select tomatoes, information on the different varieties, the right way to plant tomatoes, information on pest management, and so on and so forth. So it's an even more in-depth than what I went into today. All right. So let me open it up to questions.
Mike, there were a couple of questions in chat. The first asks, what pH do tomatoes like, and do you test your water?
I don't test my water. They like most vegetables, they like it slightly acidic. Although tomatoes will do well in a range from slightly alkaline all the way to slightly acidic. I've not had much of an issue around that because in the containers, I'm using potting soil, and that's balanced. I'm also on city water. I know if you're on well water, that might be an issue.
A related question. What type of soil would you recommend for container gardening? For instance, soil for containers or mulch, and what do you do?
So brand wasn't particularly important. In fact, on purpose, I went down to the hardware store that's near me and bought the cheapest one they had just to see how that would work. And that worked just fine for me. You might want to amend it with a little bit of compost. That's always good, for anything that you're planting. But I would avoid the ones that have fertilizer in them, just because it might cause you to first over fertilize, and second, the fertilizer that's in these soils doesn't last very long. So you're paying extra money for something that you're not going to get a whole lot out of. You're better off buying the ones without the fertilizer and adding your own fertilizer to it.
Okay, I think you hit this earlier in the slide deck, but The question is, what's the minimum of square feet or gallon container that a potted tomato needs?
So, the absolute minimum is five. I wouldn't do it with less than 10. The containers that I used, and let me scroll back up and show you mine. Oh, those are mine. Those are 50 liter, which is 13 gallons, and that was a really good size. And I don't know how I managed to stumble onto some metric ones, but 10 and 5 gallon ones like this are quite common and pretty inexpensive.
Okay, great. Ashley asked, does anyone use a homemade non-toxic spray as an insect preventative on their tomato or vegetable plants? And you can respond, but if any of our people watching have a favorite homemade non-toxic spray, you can put that in the chat and share it with us. What about you, Mike?
I have not. I actually tend to try to avoid spraying for insects unless I absolutely have to. But if somebody has something that's good, I'd like to hear about it, particularly for aphids. The larger insects I just pick right off, but aphids, sometimes there can just be so many of them that you can try to spray it and they don't come off. So if somebody's got something good that works good for aphids, I'd love to hear about that.
Okay, and there's a final question, and that is, will Prairie Fire variety tomatoes be sold at the sale? And you said yes.
Yes, they will be.
Bring cash or checks, folks.
Oh, somebody asked, yeah, would there be how we can get access to the recording? There, I've got that actually on a slide for that.
There you go.
On our website, it'll right down here, it says past programs and events.
And Mike, we have another question. Please clarify water. Did you say 1 gallon per hour dripper, two times per week?
Right. That's what worked for me for the size of container that I have. So that's what I did. I did put 1 gallon per hour drip, one drip on each plant. And I watered 2 times a week for 45 minutes, which works out to 1.5 gallons a week.
Great.
All right. If not, I thank you all very much. Definitely encourage you to come on out for our tomato sale. We also are going to have some other tomato workshops coming up. We have another Zoom presentation for tomatoes on Sunday, the day after our tomato sale, and you can find information on our website about that. And also, like I said, even if you don't want to grow tomatoes, come on out to our tomato sale anyway and talk to our master gardeners with your gardening questions. Or we have another resource that I actually didn't talk about is now that it's summer, we're starting to have our master gardener booth out at the Napa farmers market. So we'll be out there to answer your gardening questions on Tuesdays.
Thank you, Mike. And before we leave, just as if you're interested in growing food, join us in May as well. Our library talk will be on growing summer melons. Oh,
we got another question there. It said, given this year's weather, when is the best time to plant? The best time to plant is when the soil temperature is between 55 and 60 degrees. I know that's a really technical answer, but typically that means right about the very end of April or the 1st of May. So if you buy plants from us, you're really going to want to hang on to them for a couple of weeks, especially with the weather we've had, because it's been so much cooler. I don't think we're going to see those soil temperatures until we get toward the 1st of May.
That's another good thing about growing them in containers. You get the soil warmer faster.
Right, you get the soil warmer faster. Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us.